Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar with Mrs. Marion Walsmann to talk about the General Product Safety Directive and the report which she did now a couple of months ago for the European Parliament on that directive. And I think we're looking forward very much to hearing from her views on how the directive, which we'll be hearing about later this year from the Commission, how that should be structured and the sort of areas which need to be addressed in any review of that. Can I say thank you very much to all of you, and particularly to Mrs. Walsmann for joining us today. We have somewhere like 300 participants registered, and we have a long list of questions, so we're not actually going to take any new questions, so the chat function is not on today. But I hope that the questions which we will be putting to Mrs. Walsmann will cover most of the areas which you want to hear about from her. Maybe I can just introduce Mrs. Walsmann first of all. Mrs. Walsmann studied law in the University of Leipzig, was a member of the state parliament, the Landtag in Thuringia, from 2004 until 2018. She, during that period, was also State Minister for Justice and subsequently for Finance in the state government of Thüringen, and was also the representative of Thüringen in the EU Committee of the Regions. So she has a long background in politics and a long background in European politics as well. She's been an MEP since 2019 for the European People's Party, and what is particularly interesting for us today, she was the rapporteur for the own initiative report by the Parliament on the review of the General Product Safety Directive. Before giving the floor to her, I thought I'd just give you a little bit of background on what our sector, and I suspect many other sectors, will be looking for when the Commission does come forward with a proposal later this year. We are, as a sector, because we have to deal with consumers every single day of our lives, incredibly strongly committed to the safety of our customers. I think people have seen the measures which our sector has taken in protecting customers and staff during the COVID crisis. And also, we have an equal commitment to ensuring that the things that we sell them are safe and don't do them any harm. I think we very much welcome the balanced and, I think, if I can say an English word, common sense approach in Mrs. Walsmann's report to what is actually quite a difficult and complicated subject. As we said at the time, we think that it is indeed high time for a review of the directive, which is getting a bit old and needs some updating to take account of the way that the market which we're operating in has developed with digitalization, greater demand for sustainability, and generally much more informed consumers than we had before. And, you know, I think it's fair to say that under the directive and various other directives covering a lot of different sectors, the most risky products are probably already covered by regulation. So I think that what we should be focusing on, and I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more from Mrs. Walsmann about that, is enforcement of those regulations and making sure that dangerous products do not get to the consumer, which I'm afraid isn't always the case at the moment. I'm afraid there are too many risky bits of equipment out on the market as it stands. Another point that we would certainly wish to see in terms of enforcement is a better cooperation between the customs authorities and the RAPEX, or now called Safety Gate process, to ensure that something which has been sent from a company, let's say in China, which is quite clearly dangerous, is picked up at customs rather than ending up in the authorities' in-tray as a problem which has perhaps hurt somebody or indeed even killed them in some cases. So one of the things that we'll be pressing for is a closer relationship between the RAPEX Safety Gate database and the database which all customs authorities are going to have to introduce this year in order to enforce the new one-stop shop and the removal of the VAT exemption for under 22 euros. We'll also, I hope, hear from Mrs. Walsmann a little bit about the relationship between the directive and also the new digital package which came out at the end of last year of the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, which obviously will be quite important reinforcements, if you like, of the safety directive and its, I hope, better enforcement in the future. But anyway, I've talked enough, and I'd like to give my great thanks again to Mrs. Walsmann for taking time to talk to us. Mrs. Walsmann, the floor is yours.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and a real honor to participate in this live webinar with the great team of Eurocommerce. Before we start, allow me to point out 3 important aspects. First, please allow me to apologize for last time, since we had to cancel this event, and the happier I'm that we are able to hold this webinar today. Secondly, I would like to thank all from the Eurocommerce team for organizing this event, in particular to Neil, Els and Vincent. As you can hear, English is not my mother language, and since translation could not be foreseen anymore, I am happy to do this event in English. Well, I could have this event in German or even in Russian, but we decided that English would be the best option. I would like to apologize in advance for all the mistakes I'm going to make in English. I welcome the title of this webinar, Product Safety, Legislation Fit for the Future, since this what was exactly the subject of my own initiative report that has been adopted by unanimity in IMCO and by an overwhelming majority in plenary of 23rd of November last year. I'm extremely happy about this positive outcome, since unanimity votes are very rare in IMCO, and the vote in plenary showed thus much interest that all political groups have in enhancing product safety. And of course, I really hope that the Commission heard the strong voice from the Parliament and will take it into consideration when revising the General Product Safety Directive in the second quarter of this year. I love clear messages, so let me start with an answer to the question of this event. It is simply no. The existing product safety legislation is not fit for the future. High numbers of dangerous products. Over the years, the number of dangerous products has increased progressively, and by 2019, there were around 2,200 warnings listed on RAPEX, the database for unsafe products, that I guess most of you are familiar with. So the numbers do not have a clear tendency of going down. And since this is just the official number, one can only imagine how the unofficial amount of unsafe products are. That is why we proposed, amongst other measures, to improve the effectiveness of market surveillance by asking the member states to equip them better, not only with financial means, but also concerning human resources and including the use of innovative technologies to identify unsafe products and to improve cooperation between market surveillance, authorities between themselves and cross-border and with the custom authorities. Secondly, products embedding new technologies. The General Product Safety Directive dates back 2001. 19 years later, it is about time to review this directive for its ability to meet the current challenges since the nature of products have changed. Products embedding emerging technologies like artificial intelligence are challenging the existing General Product Safety Directive. The existing gaps have to be closed without causing administrative burden. Just to give you an example, the decisive moment for the assessment of the safety of products in the General Product Safety Directive is the placing on the market. AI, however, gives the product the ability to evolve and even change corresponding functions. As you can see, adjustments are needed there. Amongst others, we are proposing to stick to the risk-based approach. The more risky a product with an AI application is, the stricter the rules for conformity assessment will be. This is already the case today. For high-risk AI, we should provide human supervision. Additionally, there is a need to provide a stronger networking infrastructure, including 5G, because AI needs fast, rich, and secure data to function safely. Thirdly, no responsibilities for online marketplaces. Moreover, products, not only since Corona, are increasingly bought online. The online marketplaces, however, do not currently have an obligation to check their goods for compliance with product safety regulations. Many of the products purchased online also come from third countries, and due to the rather low level of border controls, these often do not comply with European product safety regulations. 50% of all products reported as dangerous came from China. Our aim is to put offline and online shops or marketplaces on one level. That is why we are proposing, amongst others, online marketplaces to check if a product is on RAPEX before placing it on the online market, and to modernize RAPEX. There must be a much greater exchange between online marketplaces so that a dangerous product that has been removed from one marketplace cannot appear on other sites, as is unfortunately the case today. Online marketplaces should act proactively and cooperate more with market surveillance authorities, and also inform customers about the purchase of an unsafe product. And last but not least, traceability and recalls. The effective and efficient traceability along the supply chain is key to get reliable information for the enforcement of product safety provisions. If unsafe products are detected, it is important to track back the manufacturer, importer, distributor, and so on, in order to know where the product is available and make sure that all dangerous items are withdrawn from the market. But in all these measures, we need to, firstly, stick to appropriate measures. So we have to analyze what is already possible nowadays and what kind of legislation applies already in order to have realistic requirements that do not cause administrative burden and that do not hinder innovation. Secondly, we have to give the small players like SMEs and micro enterprises additional guidance and help to cope with the new obligations. I'm going to stop here in order to have enough time to discuss your questions, and I'm looking forward to them. In case you still have open questions after this event, please do not hesitate to contact me and my team. We are very thankful for your messages, and we will answer on that, since you know that we love clear messages. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Walsmann. I think that gives us an extremely good introduction to the issues and some of the questions which we're about to hear from my colleague Els. I think the two things which we really appreciated with your report, as I said, was the emphasis on proportionality and also on a risk-based approach, which I think is the right way of going about some of the regulations that need to be put in place or indeed reinforced in terms of monitoring and enforcement. May I now introduce my colleague Els Bedert, who has been following very closely the directive and will be obviously dealing with our input into the draft which the Commission will be presenting, I think, in the fourth quarter of this year. So you're about to see me disappear from the screen and Els take over. So thank you very much again, Mrs. Walsmann. I look forward to talking to you a bit later.
Thank you very much, Neil. Mrs. Walsmann. Yes, we have a few questions for you, which I think will follow on from the introduction, quite nicely from the introduction that you gave. And maybe we will be able to go a little bit deeper in some of the issues that you already highlighted in your introduction. As Neil said, indeed, consumer safety, of course, is of utmost importance for our consumer-facing sector. And we have various regulations that clearly spell out the responsibilities and the obligations for the different types of operators on the market. And these are indeed in line with their actual activities, their respective activities where they have control over. So I'm also very happy to hear your reference to proportionate and risk-based approach. Of course, dangerous products, when they are found on the market, they do affect consumer trust, and they also directly or indirectly affect our sector as a consequence. So as Neil mentioned, we have gathered some questions when we launched the invitation for this webinar. And so I will read out one of the first one following on from what I just said is, it's a twofold question, basically. The question is, how can the Consumer Product Safety Directive be reformed to help identify, sorry, and oops, my voice is getting to help identify and remove potentially dangerous goods before they reach the market, and while avoiding overburdening retailers who are already under immense pressure. And the second part of the question would be, how do we manage to ensure that the same rules apply consistently across the different channels and the different players? So I would like to hear your views on that. Thank you.
Well, the operator that puts the product on the market is in charge of making sure that a product is safe. We do not want this change, to change this principle. It is the duty of market surveillance and custom authorities to check the safety of products entering the single market. The market surveillance authority must become much more efficient and also cooperate more closely with the custom authorities. They have to be stringent, and more resources should be made available to them, and they should also be better staffed. Dangerous products must not only be identified more quickly, for example, through uniform controls throughout Europe, but communication between the authorities must be faster. Additionally, customs authorities must increasingly make product safety a priority. With the appropriate equipment, potentially dangerous products, which often come from third countries, can be identified and then checked before they enter the internal market.
Thank you very much for that response. Indeed, I think we fully support the reference that you made to uniform controls. We have seen, indeed, our members, the results that they get when they actually have products in different or they're marketing products in different member states could be quite diverging, which causes a lot of extra cost and confusion also, indeed, when you have to sort of sample and analyze your products and get them back into the right safety level. So yeah, we absolutely support that, as do we support the better coordination information, because indeed, as you mentioned, there is a lack of resources, and therefore the resources that are there, I think there's a lot to learn and build on information that is existing in different teams, basically, or different countries. So yeah, we are fully supported, and we think that this will really increase the efficiency of the enforcement. So maybe building on from that, for us, indeed, enforcement really needs to underpin all the actions that the business operators are doing, because they have, of course, a responsibility before they put things on the market, and they have the checks to do. And but they can not do it alone. They need the competent authorities to really find the rogue traders, because these really operate often under the radar. So let's go after them, a risk-based approach, and make sure that they don't escape, and not only maybe to go for the most visible retailers, which we are, of course, in the high street and online. So there's one side of enforcement which is very necessary, but the question that I would like to put to you is that we can look at it from two sides. Should the focus be, according to you, more on capacity building, so helping business how they need to comply, what are the rules in the EU, for example, all the imports from third countries? Maybe a part is that they just do not know what the requirements are. Do you think the focus should be there, or is it really all about controls and finding and fining the operators that do not comply? What, according to you, would have the most impact?
I have always preferred incentives instead of penalties. After all, it is in the interest of the sellers themselves that they put a safe product on the market, and that their product does not present any harm to the buyer. In particular, SME have to get additional help, since they often do not have the resources and the knowledge to cope with new legislation. In the Product Safety Report, we propose a think small first principle. This principle should be used when assessing the impact of future legislation, and therefore it should take due account of the need to provide support to SMEs to reduce the burden these measures can create, and to ensure a stable, predictable and properly regulated environment in which SMEs can conduct their businesses. Product safety rules must be clear and uniform so that there is no misunderstanding about which safety rules apply to a certain product, and that at the same time bureaucracy and fragmentation of the internal market is avoided.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, something that we can fully endorse. Maybe moving on to a second sort of focus of the questions, something which I know a lot of people that are listening in are very interested in, that is the online shopping and the platform liability. Well, we all know that the trading environment has changed very strongly over the last 10 years. So you have more connected consumers, you have more online players that operate inside or outside the EU. And of course, you have the marketplaces who are also still new ones also appearing on the market. They offer opportunities for retailers, for small businesses, for consumers also, but they also bring challenges. And I think we all acknowledge that. So the question that we had received on this reads, only goods imported by traditional importers are obliged to meet product safety rules and product liability, and not those from third country traders via online marketplaces. How can we ensure offline and online are treated equally, and to ensure consumer safety and full consumer rights? Thank you.
That is a very interesting question. This is not true. All products that enter the European markets have to meet the product safety standards. However, it is true that the lack of control leads to the fact that many unsafe products are being sold online. One of the most important goals for me in my report was to make online and offline purchases equal. I have proposed concrete measures to do so. First, the Commission should propose binding obligations on product safety for online marketplaces as part of the Digital Service Act, the revision of the General Product Safety Directive, and other relevant legislation. As you know, mid-December, the Commission came up with its proposal for the Digital Service Act, and it is true that it foresees clear obligations, in particular for providers of intermediary services like online marketplaces. The DSA proposal introduces for online marketplaces harmonized responsibility and obligations, which is quite necessary since member states are increasingly introducing national law imposing diligence requirements for providers. In particular, within the Article 22 of the DSA proposal, the online marketplaces are asked to ensure that traders are traceable. This is the Know Your Customer principle. To be honest, I'm not sure that this is enough. In my report, we proposed also, secondly, an increased cooperation between online marketplaces in order to prevent a product withdrawn from the market from reappearing in another online marketplace. A form of exchange of information on repeat offenders. Thirdly, in the product safety report, we even went much further by asking the online marketplaces to check their products with RAPEX before putting them online. But in order to make this possible, we absolutely have to modernize RAPEX. We see in the product safety pledge, which is of course only voluntary, that much more is possible. And I am convinced that we have to find a balanced approach that strengthens the safety of products sold online and at the same time do not harm the reputable operators. So I think the DSA proposal is the right way, but I'm urgently awaiting the review of the General Safety Directive from 2001, which is only 1 year younger as the e-commerce from 2000. The revision is expected in the second quarter of this year. Please excuse this long reply, but I can imagine that a DSA file is in the interest of quite many of the viewers today.
I can definitely confirm that. We had received quite a few questions on that, and I can also confirm we are awaiting with you on the review of the General Product Safety Directive. As you know, it got blocked was it in council or some years ago, and it's really high time that we move forward and see where we can improve. We do think there is a very good basis already. So we as Eurocommerce have not really advocated for a complete overhaul, but there's definitely room to sort of improve it and to make it more efficient. So I have a follow-up question also along the same lines. In view of the fact that indeed today we have a very different trading environment compared to 20 years ago, the question that was put to us reads, should online marketplaces be ultimately held reliable for what they sell if market surveillance authorities cannot get hold of the producer or the third-party seller on their platforms? So should these online marketplaces be held liable?
This is a very good question, and of course it makes sense to get from the question of the safety of the product to the question of the liability. As you know, the safety of the product to the As you know, the DSA proposal maintains the liability rules for providers of intermediary services as set out in the e-commerce directive. So it's Article 7 of this proposal that clarifies again that there is no general obligation to monitor the information which online marketplaces transmit. And of course, if you are not responsible for it, then you cannot be held liable for the content. If we take the approach of the proposal on DSA, the online marketplaces have to respect additional requirements like inter alia. checking their business partner and having a single point of contact, but they should not be responsible for the products that are selling on their platform. And this whole question of responsibilities and liability of online marketplaces will be discussed in detail within our legislative work on the DSA. As a member of IMCO, I can tell you that consumer protection is a key element for me. I'm convinced that it would have been a better approach to make a difference between, on the one hand, content platforms in which fundamental rights of the users play an important role, and so general monitoring obligations of the platforms should be prohibited, and on the other hand, online marketplaces in which it is not about the fundamental rights of the users, but about the health of the consumers, so about the safety of a product. But this distinction has unfortunately not been done by the Commission within their DSA proposal. It just puts the one-size-fits-all approach to all platforms. We will see within the discussion on this file how Parliament will change the proposal. And we need your input on it. Please allow me to make a call to all of you to participate at the debate in the EP. Please send us your position papers and help us to create a balanced approach with leads not just strengthening the safety of products and the consumer protection, but also to a good business environment for EU enterprises. That will be my wish.
Thank you very much for that. I hope you will not regret this call, because you might be flooded by lots of papers coming your way and telephone calls. So be prepared. Yes, so I think there is another section that I would like to move to, that is, again, market surveillance and safety gates, so the RAPEX. So the question here is, non-compliant products presenting a serious risk and affecting the safety of consumers have become widespread in the single market. Does MEP Walsmann agree that more should be done on this issue, and should she favor market surveillance authorities carrying out mystery shopping at least once a year for products presenting a serious risk? Well, quite specific, the question, mystery shopping. That's what I do every day, I can promise you.
Oh yes, oh, yes. In my draft report on product safety, I already mentioned so-called mystery shopping. I know that many associations carry out their own mystery shopping and then publish the results, but I strongly believe that market surveillance authority should carry out sector-specific mystery shopping on a regular basis. In particular, I think it would be good to conduct mystery shopping related to products that often appear on RAPEX. In 2019, for example, 29% of the most frequently reported products were toys. I would suggest to the Market Surveillance Authority to start right there.
That's a very clear call. I hope they're on this call as well, because yeah, toys are of course a very sensitive product. I would just like to say that I think what we find useful, if these things happen, I've heard this from members, indeed, many different organizations do actually mystery shopping, not particularly the authorities, but it's also good to go in dialogue with the operator, because sometimes you are not really fully informed about what has been done. And I think the aim of this is as well to improve together to remove these products. So I do think there has to be a dialogue linked to the mystery shopping. And indeed, on SafetyGate or RAPEX, that's most people might still know it. Indeed, it is a very important source for our members to follow. However, it's not always easy to know which products are actually meant, which products are actually reported. It could be because there is no picture, it could be because there is no barcode, it could be sometimes because there is no packaging. Sometimes the packaging on which something is sold would also give an indication to the retailer, the distributor, if it is part of the product range. So indeed, I think there is the RAPEX is a good tool. We think it can be improved. And I would also like to put that same question to you. How do you think that the regulator's guidance notes, so before you put something on the safety gate, can be improved to make sure that we have all the proper information there to act?
Also, I think RAPEX is far too user-unfriendly, too complicated, and too rigid. The system urgently needs modernization. Ideally, online marketplaces should create an interface with RAPEX, but this is hardly visible with the current version. We need a new version, I think. RAPEX has to be modernized.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Indeed, I think interoperability is always something that our members are also asking for. It makes it easier. And indeed, but the bottom line still remains that you have to have as much information on the product as possible. So really to be help identifying those products that are there, that are dangerous. So let's hope for that as well. A more performant RAPEX system. We are gathering a very nice wish list for the Commissioner for the member states. I think this is the last section that I would briefly like to touch upon, and this is more about AI and connected devices. As well here, maybe some of the issues are not of the highest importance if you look at the product for our sector, but definitely AI as technology is something that is very promising and can help in a lot of even checking complaints, and can also help in market surveillance. So it is definitely something that we as Eurocommerce are also following and commenting on. The specific question is quite broad, I think. So the question is, how can we be sure that any upcoming new legislative framework for AI will not hinder or disrupt the use of AI in our daily operations? And the second part of the question reads, we do not have a clear harmonized definition of what is considered AI in itself, and we still do not have a definition of a risk nor a definition of a harm. Do you believe there should be a global definition to defining AI and the other issues that I just mentioned? Thank you.
Now I will try to answer the question. That is precisely the balancing act that should be done when drafting legislation. To ensure legal clarity by closing legal gaps, but at the same time not hindering innovation. Regulatory sandboxes are a good way of allowing the industry to find itself the best safety standards, which can be a source of inspiration for the legislation. There are many sector-specific legislations on products. Think about the harmonized legislations. We need to make sure that we create coherent horizontal rules and keep the existing lex specialis. I'm firmly convinced that it would be best if we had an international definition of AI in order to prevent fragmentation of the market in such an innovative field as AI embedding products, not only in Europe, but international. But I would still suggest that we start with an European definition in the first place. It would be better.
Yes, let's break it into smaller pieces. Let's start at European level. Absolutely. I've actually come to the end of the questions that we had gathered so far. I am not sure if we can bring in Neil for the moment to see if Neil would maybe follow up with something that you have picked up during our conversation.
Well, indeed, maybe I can make not a very good joke as an intervention on artificial intelligence. There was a very nice little comment actually in a German newspaper I was reading, which said, "I don't understand why we need all this artificial intelligence. We have enough natural stupidity in the world already." So, anyway, I did have a supplementary question, and Mrs. Walsmann, if you'd prefer to answer this in German, since it's not one that we gave you advance notice of. And that's really the question of the role of consumers in responsibility, if you like, for their own safety. That's not taking away the argument that we need, all of us in the supply chain, to make sure that that safety is guaranteed. But if you think about some of the products which have been on sale in some of the platforms, which are clearly very, very, very cheap, how can we educate or help consumers to also buy responsibly as well as us selling responsibly? If you'd like to answer that in German, I'm very happy to translate for you.
I will answer in my mother language, if it is possible. It's easier.
Yeah, please.
Ich finde, die Rolle der Konsumenten dürfen wir nicht aus dem Blick verlieren. Die Rolle der Konsumenten ist sehr, sehr wichtig. Sie müssen auch mit den Produkten richtig umgehen. Und da ist es wichtig, dass sie die richtigen Informationen haben, die richtigen Anleitungen auch mit den Produkten umzugehen. Und es ist schwierig, die Verbraucher auch darauf hinzuweisen, richtig einzukaufen oder anders einzukaufen. Ist oft auch eine Frage des Geldes. Viele Verbraucher greifen oft auch nach den preisgünstigsten Produkten und merken dann, dass es nicht immer eine Frage des Geldes ist, sondern dass es auch eine Frage ist, wie ein Produkt beschrieben ist, wie ein Produkt mehr oder weniger auch auf den Markt gebracht wird. Also es ist ja für viele Konsumenten oft in erster Linie eine Frage des Geldes, und im zweiten Blick merkt man dann, dass man vielleicht nicht nur auf die finanzielle Seite schauen sollte, sondern eben auch das, was zu dem Produkt erklärt wird und wie ein Produkt präsentiert wird. Also das ist letztendlich gehört es auch zusammen. Es gehört natürlich auch die Verantwortung des Produzenten, auch des Inverkehrbringers dazu, dass man letztendlich die Gebrauchsanweisungen, die Hinweise zu dem Produkt mit im Blick hat. Aber ich glaube, das sind die Punkte, die man auch mal ansprechen sollte in diesem Punkt.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll just do a very quick translation of that, and thank you very much for the answer. What Mrs. Walsmann was saying was that she said indeed that we should not lose sight of the role of the consumer in the choices that they make, but they need to have the right information and full instructions. And I have to say, some products that I have bought cheaply from China, for example, seem to have instructions which are in no known language, including Chinese, that they must have instructions which are easily understandable by the consumer. She felt that it was difficult to guide consumers to buy the right thing. Quite often, it was frankly a matter of money, and many people will naturally, because they don't have that much money, will go for the cheapest available. But it is also a matter of how the product is placed on the market, how it's described to the consumer, and how it's presented so that one knows that this is something which is cheap and perhaps not as good as something which is a bit more expensive. And that brings together essentially the responsibilities of the producer and of the distributor to make sure that that presentation and that description, and indeed the way that the thing is described in the instructions for it as well, are able to provide the safety that is necessary for the consumer. I hope that was more or less a faithful translation. You see, I do speak a bit of German. Are there any other points you would like to make, Mrs. Walsmann? We've only got about another 5 or 6 minutes left before we end. Is there any particular point that you would find helpful to go beyond the questions that we have already put to you? Again in German, please, if you like.
Nein, ich wiederhole gerne nochmal meine Anregung für die Diskussion auch des DSA-Paketes, mir Ihre Anregungen, Ihre Stellungnahmen zu geben, denn wir wollen eine möglichst ausgewogene Diskussion haben. Und wir stehen ja jetzt am Beginn der Debatte auch. Wir gehen jetzt erst in den Prozess der Verteilung des Berichtes, und der IMCO ist zwar schon sehr weit, aber ich finde, es ist sehr, sehr wichtig, alle Seiten auch zu kennen, und deshalb lade ich immer herzlich ein, mir immer auch Ihre Statements zuzuleiten, Ihre Anregungen zuzuleiten, und ich bin gerne auch weiter mit allen im Gespräch. Das macht mir sehr viel Freude, und die Sprachbarriere werden wir überwinden. Dankeschön.
Thank you very much indeed. Mrs. Walsmann just wanted to repeat her request and indeed her encouragement to people to submit their suggestions. As my colleague Els said, you may regret having asked people that because you may be flooded. But anyway, I think that's a very, very welcome suggestion to everyone. You say that obviously in the Parliament, you're in the process at the moment of distributing the rapporteur roles on the DSA and some of the other proposals which will come forward. And clearly we'll be looking forward very much to interacting with you. This is my comment now on the proposal from the Commission. But we can certainly display on our website when this recording is available for people, your email address, so that if people do want to get in contact with you, I'm sure that they will take up that very, very kind offer. So I think, although we've still got about another 5 minutes left, unless there are any points that else wanted to throw at you before we let you go.
Thank you, Neil. I'm fine. I think we've had a lot of very useful input already, which we can work with going forward, and we will certainly also be following up once the GPSD proposal has come out. So for now, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Dann sage ich Ihnen, Frau Walsmann, herzlichen Dank für Ihre Zeit hier bei uns und sehr, sehr gute Anregungen. I was just thanking Mrs. Walsmann for her time with us and her suggestions and her very good answers to the questions that we had from everyone. We look forward very much to working with you in the future. And indeed, we look forward very much to interacting with those people who have dialed in today to listen to what Mrs. Walsmann had to say. Mrs. Walsmann told me before we started that it was -20 in Erfurt, where she's sitting at the moment, very snowy. So I would say keep warm, and we wish you a very, very good week. And thank you again for your time, and thank you to our audience for their time as well. And thank you, Else, I should not forget, for putting the questions.
Herzlichen Dank. Vielen herzlichen Dank für die Debatte und lassen Sie uns im Dialog bleiben. Vielen, vielen Dank.
Right. Let's keep in dialogue, Mrs. Walsmann says. So thank you very much. That is the end of our webinar. And I hope that everyone who's been listening in has enjoyed what I thought was a very good exchange of questions and answers. And we look forward to seeing you again in some of our other webinars coming up in the next few months. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.